She fell in love with the perfect stranger only to discover he was the heir to the empire that destroyed her family. But what happens when love dares to challenge the past? And the truth is the deadliest weapon of all. Rain swept across the stone-paved streets of Edinburgh as if the sky itself wept for what was to come. The city wore its usual cloak of grey, mist curling around lamp-posts and dampening the sounds of hurried footsteps. Among those steps echoed the soft tread of Aurora Linden, a travel photographer whose eyes saw more than her camera ever captured. She was 31, independent, graceful, and unknowingly standing at the edge of the most defining chapter of her life. Aurora had returned to Scotland after 5 years of wandering through continents in search of light and shadow. The death of her adoptive father brought her back, the man who raised her after she was found abandoned as a toddler near the border of England. His passing left her with an old stone house perched near Arthur's Seat and a bundle of unanswered questions. Though she rarely allowed herself the indulgence of emotion, that morning she found herself drawn to the North Bridge. It wasn't just nostalgia or grief. Something pulled her there. She tightened her trench coat against the wind and crossed the bridge, camera slung around her neck. As she paused near the railing to take a shot of the fog blanketing the rural mile, a stranger stepped into frame. Tall, dark-haired, with a sharp jawline and the kind of presence that suggested secrets, he seemed unaware she was photographing him. Then, just as she lowered the lens, his eyes locked with hers. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. Aurora's fingers hesitated on the shutter. Something was haunting in his gaze, like he recognized her in a way that defied logic. She looked down at her camera to check the shot but found the frame empty. He had moved away, vanished into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Her pulse quickened. She felt something ripple through her chest, unfamiliar and persistent. That night, unable to shake the encounter, Aurora developed the film. Nothing appeared where he stood. The frame was clear. The fog still swirled, but the man was gone, as though he had never been there at all. The next day brought more than confusion. It brought a letter, slipped under her door. The envelope bore no stamp or address, just her name in slanted script. Inside was a single sentence written in ink that had begun to bleed through the edges of the parchment. "You saw me because you were meant to." No name, no explanation. Aurora stared at the note for hours, rereading the words, analyzing the handwriting, questioning the reality of what she saw. Her logical mind fought the pull of mystery, but her heart raced with something she couldn't define. She tucked the letter into her journal and resolved to return to the bridge the following morning, but the next day, the fog never lifted. For hours, she walked the length of the bridge, her camera ready, but the man did not appear. The letter haunted her. So did the memory of those eyes. That evening, she visited her adoptive father's lawyer to finalize the estate transfer. As she flipped through the paperwork, something caught her attention. A sealed envelope was tucked inside a hidden pocket of the document folder. Her name was on it, but the handwriting was not her father's. This time, the message was longer. "The answers you seek are buried in the house, but not in places light can touch. Trust no one who comes with answers too quickly. And if he finds you first, remember what I taught you about silence." There was no signature, but the letter carried the scent of pine and something deeper, metallic and old. Aurora returned home. Before sunset, the wind sharp and strange. The house stood quiet, though the atmosphere felt thicker, as though it remembered things she did not. She lit a fire, made tea, and sat in the library, staring at the letter. Her mind searched for meaning. Who was he? What answers? Why now? After all these years? She wandered the house until she found herself standing in the basement. It was a place she rarely visited. Dust covered the shelves, and cobwebs hung like forgotten memories. A draft came from behind a bookcase. Instinct urged her forward. Moving aside the shelf, she found a hidden door, old and rotting. Inside the room, dim and cold, lay a box, wooden, carved with symbols she couldn't identify. It wasn't locked. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, but they weren't hers. They were of her, some from her childhood, some recent, all taken without her knowledge, and in every photo, The stranger from the bridge stood nearby, sometimes in the background, sometimes across the street, sometimes no more than a shadow in a window's reflection. Aurora gasped, a hand to her chest, her breath caught between fear and disbelief. Who was he? Why had he been watching her? Why now? Her heart thundered as she picked up the final photograph in the box. It was taken that morning. From her bedroom window, rain fell harder the next morning as Layla sat quietly by the window of the boutique cafe, its soft hum barely masking the weight in her chest. The aroma of roasted espresso beans lingered in the air as passers-by blurred behind streaked glass. Her fingers were wrapped around a porcelain mug, not for warmth but to stop them from trembling. She had not slept. How could she? After what she had discovered last night about Aiden, she stared at her phone again. 3 missed calls from Ida, no texts, no explanation, just silence inside her mind. A war brewed between the men she loved and the men she barely knew her. Thoughts spiraled back to the old trunk she had opened in his apartment. A trunk she had never seen before, sealed until last night. She had only wanted to find a sweater that he had borrowed instead. She found folders of government documents, surveillance, photos, a black pistol, and a letter with foreign embassy stamps. What kind of man lives a double life with such ease, and why did her name appear in some of those? Flesh closed her eyes and inhaled, trying to suppress the nausea creeping upward before she could gather her composure. The chair across from her creaked. She looked up. A woman she had never seen before sat down, cool, confident, and dressed in an all-black coat. Layla's body stiffened. The woman spoke calmly. You should stop asking questions you aren't prepared to answer. Layla blinked. Excuse me. Woman slid a small envelope across the table. You love him. We know, but you're in danger now. So is Hethan. Without another word, she stood and vanished into the crowd outside. Layla's hand hovered over the envelope for a moment before she snatched it and tucked it into her coat. She didn't open it, not yet, not here. Back in her apartment, Layla drew the curtains and locked the door behind her. Heart pounding, she opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single flash drive and a note scribbled in sharp handwriting. If you want to save him, you need to know who he is. Layla turned the flash drive over in her fingers. Her gut screamed at her to throw it away. Pretend none of this was happening, but her heart whispered something else. If this is how you protect him. She booted up her laptop and inserted the drive. Within seconds, folders unfolded, exposing a web of operations, intelligence briefings, voice recordings, and video logs. In one grainy video, Aidan appeared in a warehouse arguing with someone in Russian. Layla's breath caught. Another folder opened to photos of Aidan following a man through the streets of Prague, then Istanbul. This was no accident. She clicked on an audio file, and Aidan's voice filled the room. This is Agent Kessler reporting from Istanbul, code 43.7. The girl doesn't know yet, but she's the key to the target's pressure point. I'll keep her close. Seeth mug in Layla's hand crashed to the floor. Use her. Everything had been a lie. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She stood and paced, gripping the flash drive like a weapon. How long had this been going on? What did he mean by pressure point? Had she simply been a pawn in a game too big to understand? Her phone rang again. Aiden's declined. Then a message popped up. We need to talk. I can explain everything. I swear. Layla typed back one word and then turned off the phone. For the next 3 days, Layla disappeared from her own life. She didn't go to work. She didn't answer her best friend's calls. Instead, she spent her time piecing together the contents of the drive, tracing patterns and names, trying to make sense of why someone would lie so convincingly for so long, until finally, something clicked. Damning the documents she found, old field reports from 12 years ago, and photographs showed a younger Aidan standing beside a woman, her mother, but her mother had died when Layla was 17 in a supposed car crash. Suddenly everything twisted. Layla's vision blurred. She printed the photograph and taped it to her wall. The puzzle had only begun. Oh, it wasn't just about Aiden, it was about the truth, about her mother, about herself. Door bootsed. Layla peeked through the peephole at Aiden. She didn't open. It spoke through the door, his voice low and desperate. You don't know the whole story, Lael. Please just let me in. Let me tell you why I did it. No answer. He rested his forehead against the door. They killed her, Layla. Your mother. She was one of us, and they killed her because she found something she wasn't supposed to. Layla's knees weakened. He continued. You were never supposed to get dragged into this, but when they found your name in her old files, they came after you. I stepped in to protect you. That's all I ever wanted. The silence between them now crackled with unspoken grief and tangled truth. She opened the door. Aiden looked older in just a few days, his eyes sunken and full of sorrow. You're lying, Gim. Notch shoved the photo at him. Explained. Fish stared at it. It's not a lie. That's your mother. She recruited me, and now she must decide whether to trust Aidan and join him in uncovering the conspiracy that took her mother's life, or walk away. For the days that followed Adrian's confession were clouded with confusion and conflict. Evelyn couldn't sleep without replaying every word he had said. His admission of being a part of a covert operation was far from something she could ignore. It was like discovering the man she loved was built on a lie. But that lie had shielded her, loved her, and perhaps even saved her. She walked through the garden outside their rented villa, each step heavy with thoughts. Adrian had kept his distance since the night he told her the truth. He hadn't tried to explain further. He gave her space, and in that silence, she could hear the echoes of her heartbeats asking questions her mind couldn't answer. Then came the letter. It was left on her nightstand, sealed in a plain envelope. It wasn't signed, but she recognized Adrian's handwriting immediately. She opened it, her fingers trembling slightly. The words were raw, honest, and carefully chosen. You have every reason to hate me, to walk away, to never trust me again. But before you decide, I need to tell you what I couldn't that night. Not everything about me was a lie. The name was, yes, but the love, the moments, the things I whispered to you under moonlight and storm, they were all real. If you still want the truth, I will give it to you. Meet me tomorrow at the stone pier before sunrise. Come alone. If you don't come, I'll disappear from your life for good. Evelyn folded the letter slowly and sat down on the edge of her bed. She stared out of the window toward the horizon. The idea of seeing him again terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. She didn't sleep that night. At dawn, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and walked toward the pier. Adrian was already there, standing like a statue carved from regret and resolve. The waves behind him crashed against the rocks, fierce and cold, mirroring the tension in the air between them. He didn't speak immediately. He looked at her like he wasn't sure she'd come. When she nodded slightly, he stepped forward. I was recruited at 20, he began. A program no one talks about. They train you to live two lives, one visible, one buried. I was good at it. Too good. They sent me to intercept men who used false companies to smuggle people, drugs, and weapons. My last assignment led me to Michael, your former fiancé. Evelyn's breath caught. I didn't know he was connected to you when I started. I was just supposed to monitor his operations. But then I saw you. You weren't part of the file. You were accidental. At first, I used our meeting to get close to Michael. But very quickly, it wasn't about the mission anymore. It was about you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver flash drive. This has everything. Michael's offshore accounts, wire transfers, and phone logs. All of it. I kept digging even after the assignment closed. He's not just corrupt. He's dangerous. And now he's watching both of us. Evelyn stepped back, shaken. He knows, she whispered. I think he suspects. He has people following us. I noticed it the night of the gala. That's why I told you everything. Because the lies are no longer safe for you. You're in this now, whether we like it or not. Evelyn took the flash drive. It was ice cold in her hand. I need time, she said quietly. I'll wait, he replied. She turned and walked away, heart pounding, hands shaking, carrying the weight of a truth she never wanted but could no longer deny. That evening, she drove to her sister Clara's apartment and told her everything. Clara listened, stunned, but supportive. You have to go to the authorities, Clara said. Evelyn hesitated. But what if they're in on it? Michael had power. He still does. Clara nodded slowly. Then you need someone who owes you nothing. Someone who only believes in justice. Together, They reached out to a retired prosecutor Clara had known through work. The man, George Henley, was cynical but curious. After Evelyn showed him the flash drive, his demeanor changed. He promised to look deeper, but warned them to be careful. This wasn't small-time crime. This was transnational, political, and deadly. Meanwhile, Evelyn kept her distance from Adrian, not out of hate, but for protection. She feared being followed. She changed phones, moved locations, and stayed out of sight. Every night, she wrote in her journal, trying to make sense of a world that had tilted beneath her. Then the threats began. First, a brick through Clara's window with a single word written in red, leave, then an anonymous call in the middle of the night. Evelyn answered, and a voice, cold and robotic, said, "You're digging in graves you don't understand." Evelyn was terrified, but not broken. She met Adrian in secret and told him everything. His face hardened with anger and concern. "We need to leave the country," he said. "No," she replied firmly. "We need to finish this together." They staged a plan. George Henley would meet with his old contacts and arrange an anonymous leak of the evidence to multiple international news agencies. Adrian would pose as a whistleblower, but with no mention of Evelyn's name. The night before the plan was to go live, Adrian and Evelyn found themselves alone again in the small cabin near the mountains where it had all started. "I never meant to love you this way," Adrian whispered. "And I never thought I'd fall for a man I couldn't trust," she said softly. "But maybe trust isn't about knowing everything. Maybe it's about knowing what matters." They held each other that night as the world might end by morning. The leak exploded across international media. Michael's empire cracked open like a rotten shell. Arrests began within days. Evelyn's name was never mentioned. George made sure of that. Adrian disappeared again, this time not in silence, but with a promise to return once it was safe. But just when Evelyn thought the storm was over, a letter arrived. No signature, no return address. Just one line is written in the same cold, robotic script from the phone call. "You buried the body, but the soul still breathes." And with that, the story moved into its final act. Evelyn couldn't sleep. The chill of the London night bit into her even though she was wrapped in a thick woolen blanket. Her mind was a storm of memories and questions. She kept hearing the name he had uttered, Lion Carter, the name that didn't belong to the men she thought she loved. The men who had vanished again. The men who had left behind only a single, heart-piercing note. "Forgive me, Evelyn. I was never supposed to stay." She stared at the blank wall of her bedroom as the sun began to rise, painting faint strokes of pale orange across the city skyline. She had spent weeks searching for him in silence. No calls, no messages, no news. It was as if Gabriel or a lion had vanished from the face of the earth. But Evelyn had changed. She was no longer the woman who waited. She began tracing back every lead, digging into old business deals, consulting friends of friends in legal circles, and finally found a thin thread, a dormant shell company connected to an offshore bank account bearing the signature E. Carter. That was the thread she pulled, and it led her across the ocean. She arrived in New York with a tight coat and a tighter jaw. The skyscrapers towered above her like silent judges. She didn't care. She followed the paper trail to a tech security firm, obscure, hidden, but pulsing with secrets. The kind of company only someone with a highly classified past could operate. She walked into the lobby like she belonged there. The receptionist barely looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, with the owner," Evelyn said, her voice steel. The woman frowned. "And who should I say is tell him Evelyn Wren is here, and I'm not leaving until I see him." The receptionist hesitated, then made a call. Minutes later, a tall man in a dark suit stepped into the room. He paused when he saw her. His face didn't change, but his eyes did. They flickered, shocked, haunted. "A Lion Carter," Evelyn whispered. "Come with me," he said softly. They walked down a narrow hallway until they reached a glass-walled office. He gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "So it's true. Everything was a lie." "No," he said. "It was all true, except my name." He looked older, not in years, but in weight. as if the time they'd spent apart had aged him. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for a file and handed it to her. Inside were pictures, documents, and surveillance logs. It was a dossier, her dossier, from the agency. "You were my assignment," he said. "But I fell in love with you before I even realized I was supposed to be watching you." Evelyn flipped through the pages in disbelief. "Why me?" "Because someone believed you were working with an underground network laundering political donations through academic grants. It was false, a setup. But they didn't know that when they sent me. You spied on me, slept next to me, and lied. I didn't expect you to matter, but you did. You became everything." He walked toward the window, his back to her. "When I realized you were innocent, I tried to end it. I erased files. I sabotaged the case. But they found out. They sent someone else to fix my mistake." "Is that why the accident happened? The crash?" He turned. "Yes, they tried to kill us both. When I woke up, I knew I had to disappear. To protect you." Evelyn felt her breath catch in her throat. She had been grieving a ghost while the real danger had been quietly circling her all along. "You should have told me. They would have killed you. But now I've found you. What now? Do we go our separate ways again? Do we pretend none of this happened?" He stepped closer. "You came across an ocean to find me. Don't you think that means something?" Evelyn's eyes searched his. "I don't know who you are anymore. I'm the man who failed to protect you, who lied to you. But I'm also the man who has loved you in every second of every lie." Silence settled over them like fog. Evelyn whispered, "So what happens now?" A lion opened a drawer and pulled out a small black device. He slid it toward her. "This has everything. Evidence against the people who started this. Names. Proof. I couldn't do anything before. But now, with you, maybe we can." Evelyn stared at it, then looked back up at him. "I didn't come here for revenge." "Then why?" "I came here for the truth. And maybe a new beginning." They stood in silence, two broken souls in a glass room filled with secrets. The city buzzed outside, unaware that two people inside were deciding whether love could survive lies, betrayal, and danger. He reached out slowly, carefully, as if expecting her to recoil. But Evelyn didn't pull away. She stepped into his arms. For the first time, there were no masks, no aliases, just them. As the sun rose higher over the city, Evelyn closed her eyes and whispered, "Tell me your real name." He held her closer. "My name is Elian Carter, and I love you." And this time, she believed every word. Moral life lesson: true love can endure betrayal, pain, and even deception, but only if it's rooted in truth and forgiveness. This story teaches us that hiding the truth may protect hearts in the short term, but only honesty can heal and unite them in the end. It reminds us that identity is more than a name. Love is more than a feeling, and forgiveness is the bridge between the two.